did you break into the industry? You know, sort of, you know, how hard was it?
Well, I got shot out of a cannon, really, with Muriel's Weddings. My beginning, you know, in Los Angeles was really unusual because, you know, I went over with this huge film. Muriel's Wedding was such a phenomenon. It was my first film, and it made 60 million in the US. Now, if that happened to an Australian film today, it would be, you know, front page news every day for a year. So I had a real, you know, following there. Having said that, anything I auditioned for, pretty much for 5 years I didn't get.
When you were living back in Sydney, Hollywood wasn't really something that was on your radar, was it? I mean, you were quoted as saying, I get spun out in LA when I'm in America. I feel I'm not good enough and I have to go shopping.
Well, maybe I just have a shopping problem and I'm blaming LA. I don't know, it's funny, like I did always feel very, as an Australian, I always felt very home in the UK. So when I was working, I don't know, the people, they just felt like our people. And I think, yeah, Americans are very different to Australians, and it took me, like I remember I went to this dinner party and I was like the person of honour at this dinner party, and it was right after Muriel's Wedding. I was doing a junket tour. It's a very highfalutin party that this producer had thrown to me. And this writer, who apparently was one of like the top writers on a sitcom, and he said to me, well, you're doing very well for an ugly person. And I was devastated, and I went to the toilet, and I was like, you know, trying not to cry, and it just ruined my whole night. And now I look back, and I just think, he's actually joking. Do you know what I mean? Like, he actually didn't think I was ugly. He thought I was 27 and gorgeous, or 26 and gorgeous, and, you know, it was that American humour. And I totally took it literally, because I think in LA I was like, well, yeah, I'm not beautiful. And now I just look back and go, oh, you stupid idiot.
But you're also a bit self-effacing. I mean, another quote that I've got from you is that you've been very frank about where you rank yourself in terms of looks. You said good looking but not beautiful. And you've said that's worked in your favour. That's a quote you have said before.
Yeah, I think, no, I read this great study, and it came from this study about like women executives. You have to be, you know, I think you're a really good example, like attractive, you know, handsome, but not so pretty that anyone doesn't think we have brains. Yeah. And there is I mean, I don't want to say I feel sorry for really, really beautiful women, but I think it is really hard to be taken seriously if you look like Charlize Theron. And she's not taken seriously as an actress until she does Monster. You know, I was like, oh, God, she's a model, you know. How many bloody movies are they going to give her? And then you see Monster and you're like, shame on you, you know, because I was totally doing the intelligent brunette, you know, dumbing down blonde. And I was ashamed of myself because I mean, she's unbelievably fierce and amazing. But I didn't give her credit because she's so beautiful.
Do you think women are really hard on each other?
I think we can be. I remember recently I was trolling for some reason on Daily Mail, and there was this comment about Nicole Kidman as a starlet. It was so debasing of her achievement. And I just thought, as a journalist, how can you live with yourself as a woman to want to bring down, you know, for whatever, you know, she might have divisive opinions about her work. You know, she really pushes herself to the limits in these roles, and often they're really challenging, and they're, you know, she goes for it. So she's never making safe choices, which means sometimes you kind of go, oh, you know.
Sometimes in failure is success.
Exactly, and she's prepared to do that. And there's no male equivalent of that, is there? There's no, you know, they wouldn't be calling Baby Hemsworth a star boy, which, you know, if you, no. I found it so offensive, but so maybe. But I think men don't take very beautiful women seriously for sure.
You've got 3 children.
3?
Yeah. And the eldest is a teen.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
And Clementine, your youngest.
My little baby.
Your baby, your miracle baby.
Yeah.
You've got to tell us about that.
My little miracle baby. Yeah, so I had with Clemmy, and I do tell this story because had we had a home birth,
different outcome.
I think we both would have died, actually. we would have had to have had a home birth very close to a major trauma hospital. So I had a spontaneous uterine rupture as I was naturally delivering her. And I was at Cedars-Sinai in America, which is, the best hospital really arguably on the West Coast. And everything was great. I'd seen my OB-GYN the day before. He does...
You'd seen your what?
OB-GYN.
Oh, okay.
Obstetrician? He does the Kardashians.
Okay.
He's highfalutin, fabulous OB. And he didn't think anything was happening for like a week or two. It was 2 weeks early. And then that night I went into labour, and I knew it was going to be quick because Adelaide had been an hour and a half. So I have and that's from to hello, the whole thing. Andrew jumped in the shower and I said, no, I think we should go. And we went in, and by the time I was at the hospital, I was already basically, almost, crowning. And we went straight into the delivery, and then I just had this like insane amount of pain, and then I couldn't push. So we don't know if it was a few minutes. We just don't know how compromised things were. And she can't finally, that we got her out, and she was not back, breathing and not. And I wasn't too worried because I just knew I was in with the best hands, and literally I remember slow motion, like the team kind of run over and then they push this huge red button, all the sirens go, and it felt like within 10 seconds the crew were in and they had her, tubes down, everything. So I just felt like it's going to be fine. I just had a feeling. But Andrew obviously was, super freaked out, and so he went off with her, and then I just crashed. And it was clear I was bleeding, and my doctor said, you're bleeding a lot, did you? No, I didn't bleed last time. I went to a party the next day, I checked out early, it was like the perfect birth. And he said, and then I just kind of was, something's really wrong. So I just crashed, and then they took me up, and I was in surgery for 24 hours, and I came out, and then, my husband was there. And I thought everything was all right. I mean, obviously it had been all right. But I thought from then everything was going to be all right. And I sent Andrew off to get my favourite meal from around the corner. So he went off to this very great restaurant to get me veal. I had felt like I hadn't eaten for like 3 days. So he was at the counter, and he was waiting for my veal in white wine and potatoes, which is like 5 blocks away. And I had this journal, I had a doctor just kind of standing next to me, we're chatting. And I was probably on so many drugs, I felt fine. And then I just read again, I was like, and I looked down and I just saw my stomach go up. And I just said to the doctor, I said, I'm bleeding again, aren't I? And he was watching my blood pressure, and she said, it was, girl. And she said, we're going to have to take you back. And then I just remember all the alarms going. So the machine went, all the alarms started going. And I kind of had that like, oh gosh, this is serious now. And I said, can I call my husband? So I just remember they already had me like in a drip, and I'm going up, and I was on this doctor's phone, and poor Andy, and he's at the waiting for the veal. When you do that, I love you, I'm going back in, and he just like drops the veal and runs back to the hospital. And that was, and I hadn't met Clementine then, but I knew she was okay. Everyone was positive that she was all right. And then I was in surgery for 48 hours. And then it was 9 days later that I met Clementine. You're known as an advocate for women. Can you talk about that? How do you see yourself contributing in that area? I think, smart women, and I do put myself in that box.
No, don't stop. That's it.
Okay.
Yes.
I think as we go through our journey as women, I think there is a time that we, move into those roles. You move into those senior ladies of the tribe roles. And I feel like I'm just at the beginning of that, journey. I'm no way to buttress. But growing up, thank God we had the ITAs. We just have to have prominent women who can speak for other women. And I think there is something that happens when you're, I say post-fuckable, in a way where we just don't care anymore about what other people may think of us. And so there is a huge freedom that maybe that happens in that you just go. And I think in my 20s, I probably did kind of temper thoughts I had, feelings I had. I don't think I was nearly as loud a young feminist as I should have been.
Except, hang on, in '97. You protested Melbourne's Crown Casino, turning up topless, wearing a lion cloth.
That's true. But I wasn't really advocating for women. I'm not anti-gambling. I'm not, anti-gambling on the horses. I really don't mind casinos, particularly in destinations where we go to Vegas and we're going to do this. But I think when it for that moment when Crown first came to Melbourne, it was a huge change in our city's culture. And I'm a Melbourne girl, through and through. And at that time, we also didn't have Fed Square, so there was no kind of balance to what Crown was in that kind of prime real estate. So from an urban planning thing, I also it just felt like this crazy concentration of public space for this, enterprise.
So since 2012, you've been a patron of Hagar.
I have.
A charity committed to helping the victims of trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me something about why you got involved and, and why and how.
Well, firstly, as I said, I'm a smart girl. I thought slavery didn't exist. So, so there was that first how can I not know? When I kind of first heard through somebody else's engagement, I'm like, really? This is happening? I was just so uneducated, but also I don't think it just had not been really an issue that it is now on the world stage. We hadn't, I just thought it was ended 200 years ago. It's just not real. And in a limited way, I knew of female sex trafficking, but I thought it was a very kind of niche and small problem. So there was that shock of actually kind of realising that. And I think within that, how can you be interested in human rights if, slavery is the very source of our dignity of human beings has to start with being free and having agency over our lives. And if we as a society, in 2016 have not yet solved that, then we're really still kind of stuck in, I think, our early development as a society. If the ownership and transaction of human beings is still a day-to-day occurrence, then we can't evolve. We really, really can't evolve. So there was that. And then I heard through this organisation specifically, because then you get overwhelmed, you're like, oh my God, and then you realise the level of criminal engagement and what the numbers are and how much money is being, it's overtaken arms and is, closing on drugs as being the main source of cash flow for criminal networks. So then you're just kind of like, oh, well, how can I make a difference? I can't. So, you can kind of feel overwhelmed. That issue is too big. It's just too big. Let me just do Christmas lunches at the church up the road because I can get a handle on that. And I do like keeping the local thing. And then as I heard about Hagar, because their mission, or our mission is so specific to take one person who has been, often rescued from a traffic situation, the domestic sexual enslavement. It's case by case, so it's not like this general thing, and it's medical, legal. We've flown victims to America to be tried in US courts. It's working with local authorities. Then it's education. It's deep trauma processing, because there's so much shame, especially in sex trafficking, that they take your right of dignity. They take your, especially in societies that are so conservative. So to kind of change that around and empower people to say, this happened to you, but that doesn't mean that, you are
You were the
dirty.
victim.
Yeah, and you can come through this triumphantly. And then, of course, the final thing is education to some kind of trade, because if you have economic, the ability to actually make a living, then you're worth more than being a traffic person. And there's some amazing stories like, men who have been in very bad enslaved labour are being taught how to fix cell phones. Once they can do that, they and their families and their daughters are much more secure from being in traffic situations. And one of the great, Style for Life Day that we do through the hair salons of Australia is training women to be hairdressers, because again, if you can work in a tourist resort in a salon and do a great blow dry, you're going to make more money than being in a brothel.
What's the most frustrating thing about acting? And what's the most fabulous thing about acting?
The most fabulous thing is just being able to step into other lives, and it's extraordinary, like even intellectually, the windows, you go down. So I just did this big history of the civil rights movement through gay, lesbian, transgender eyes. Gus Van Sant, Lance Dustin Black, who wrote Milk, won the Oscar for Milk. And it's going to be Gay Roots. It's a huge 8-hour miniseries. And I played a nurse who had worked really at the coalface of AIDS nursing when there was no cure. These boys were dying, they'd been rejected by their families. The orderlies wouldn't even come into the room with food because they thought they might get AIDS. I had lunch with a male nurse who had been on the ward, and clearly they've all got still post-traumatic stress. And he started weeping about just the weight of having just so many people die every week and living in that community in the Castro, and every day that person that was always there's just not there, or that person, that shop's suddenly gone, and the bar's getting thin, and he just started weeping when he talked about that time. It's like their war, So
and how do you deal with that? How do you as a person, how do you come out of that? I imagine you were filming.
I'm not really a method. I don't go deep method. Okay. If anything, I have to be careful that I'm just not too interested in this. Because you're kind of eating their lives, you're eating their stories, but for them, they lived it. So it's all very well to kind of empathise, but in the end, I wasn't holding the heads of 19-year-old boys who were begging you to, begging you to tell them they weren't going to die. I don't have to sleep with that at night. That person does. So I don't really blur those boundaries.
Okay.
I try to be respectful.
What demands does that sort of success make on you? Both in your personal and your professional life.
I think I'm one of those people that success has made me a nicer person. It's made me a more graceful person. It's made me more thankful. I think I was quite pushy when I was young, because I do think I needed a certain degree of success to fill whatever hole I had inside myself. My father left when I was 11. We had a real kind of struggle town childhood. It was kind of middle class from the outside, but behind closed doors, not a lot of excess. So I think I kind of used to push hard to get somewhere. I had ambition and drive, and I still have ambition and drive, but I think I'm an easier person to deal with. I think success does make some people nicer. I think it's made me nicer.